B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Yoma Daf Nun Daled. We're going to start in the Mishnah in the middle of Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Says the Mishnah, Mishanitel Oroin. We'll remember that in the previous Mishnah on Daf Nun Beis Amud Beis we learned that the Kohen Gadol would put the shovel on the floor, with the coals on the floor between the poles of the Oroin. In the first Beis Hamikdash, the Oroin was there, and he would put the coals down in front of the Oroin. Mishanitel Oroin. At the time, and we've discussed this already in the Gemara, at some point the Oroin was hidden before the Churban Bayis Rishon. Then where would they put the shovel with the coals until the end of Bayis Sheni? Even Hoysa Sham Miyamois Neviim Rishonim, from the time of the very early Neviim of David HaMelech and Shmuel HaNavi, and from then there was a stone there. Ushsia Hoysa Nikras. This stone was called Shasia. We'll see soon why. The word Shasia means a foundation. There was a stone that was called Even HaShasia. Gavoya min Oretz Shalish Etzbois. It was 3 fingers breadths high off the ground. And the Kohen Gadol would put the shovel with the coals on top of this stone. Continues the Mishnah. Notal es hadam mimi shehoya memaris boy. So we've discussed, he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and he put the shovel on the floor and he put the Ketores on the shovel, the whole Kodesh HaKadoshim filled with smoke. He said he came out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, said a short tefillah, and that was it. That was the first time he went in. Now we have to remember that way back he shechted his bull, on which he did his confession on behalf of himself and his family and on behalf of the Kohanim. He shechted it. And in the meantime, there was somebody standing that was stirring the blood to make sure it should not congeal. So at this point, he's now finished with the Ketores for now. Notal es hadam. He took the blood, mimi shahoya memarisboy, from the person that was stirring it, and he went nichnas lemokim shenichnas. He went back into the place he was before, namely the Kodesh HaKadoshim, va'omad b'mokim she'omad, and he went and stood in the same place between, or what would have been in the area between the 2 poles of the Oroin, v'hizom imenu, and he would sprinkle from the blood of the bull, achas lemalo, once up, v'sheva lemato, and 7 down. V'loi hoya miskavin lehazois, loi lemalo, v'loi lemato. It's not as if he was planning that the blood should be, the one up should be on the higher half of the covering of the Oroin, which was called the Kapores. It was a tefach high, and it doesn't mean that the one up means that one sprinkle onto the top half of the thickness of this covering, and the 7 on the bottom half of the thickness of this covering. That's not what it means. Elo kamatzlif. They would actually, all the drops would drop onto the floor. Kamatzlif, and we've seen this in a Gemara previously already on Daf Tezvav, that it was actually, the drops were in a line, one under the other. So what does it mean? Lemalo, lemata? We'll see in the Gemara that means that the position that the finger was the finger facing upwards or was the finger facing down? That's achas lemalo, v'sheva lemata, but the drops of blood actually fell onto the ground in a line. And this is how he would count. Achas, when he would do the 1 sprinkle upwards with his finger facing up, he would say achas, 1. And then when he would do the first sprinkle downwards, he would say achas v'achas, that 1 plus another 1. And then achas v'shtayim, that 1 and a second one. Achas v'sholish, achas v'arba, achas v'chomish, achas v'sheish, achas v'sheva, and this is familiar to all of us from the Avodas Yom Kippurim that we say during Musaf Chazaras Hashatz of Yom Kippur. So he would sprinkle once up, once with his finger towards up, 7 times down, and with the blood of the bull. Yotza, he would go out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim into the Heichal. Ve'inichoy al kan hazahav sheba Heichal. There was a gold stand in the Heichal. He would put this utensil that was holding the remaining blood of the bull, he would put it for now onto this stand. He would then go out of the Heichal, and the Mefarshim say that this probably took place Beina Ulam Lamizbeach, in the same place that he shechted the bull. They would bring him the goat. If you remember that on the Mizrach wall, the Mizrach's end of the Azara, just by the Shar Nikoner, there were his two goats. One was Lashem, one was La'azazel. The one that was Lashem, that was a Chatos, which is this soir that he now has to shecht. They would bring him this goat from next to the Shar Nikoner to the area Beina Ulam Lamizbeach. Shachtei, the Kohen Gadol would shecht it. The Kibbel b'Mizrak as Domoy, and he would collect the blood in a container. Nichnas lemokim shenichnas, and he would go with the blood of the soir back into where he came from, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'omad b'mokim she'omad, and again he would stand in the same place. V'hizom imenu, and he would then sprinkle in exactly the same way as he did with the blood of the bull. He would now do it with the blood of the goat. Achas lemalo v'sheva lemato, one up, seven down. And the Vilna Gaon says it should say here v'chulu, meaning etc., that lo hoyo miskavin hazos leilemalo v'leilemato elo kamatzlif. V'kach hoyo moine, and the counting was done the same way. Achas, achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim v'chulu, in the same way as he counted with when sprinkling the blood of the bull, he did the same when sprinkling the blood of the goat. Yotza, he then went out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'hinichoy al kan hazov hasheni shebeheichol. There was a second golden stand in the heichol where he would put the blood of the goat. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo hoyo shem elo kan echod bilvad. In the heichol there was actually only a single stand to hold these vessels, these utensils with the blood. And what would he do? Not al dam hapor. Once he came out with the blood of the goat, he would then remove the remaining blood, the container with the remaining blood of the bull. He would remove it from the stand, from the single stand that was there, according to Rabbi Yehuda. V'hiniach dam hasar, and the container that he just come out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the remaining blood of the goat, he would put in its place onto that stand. And what would he do now with the blood of the bull? V'hizo mimenu, he would sprinkle ala paroiches towards the curtains. He was standing in the heichal, facing the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he would sprinkle towards the curtain ala paroiches shekeneged orin, in the center of the heichal, towards where the orin was on the other side of the curtain. Mibachutz, that means from within the heichal. Achas lemalo v'sheva lemata, which means they didn't have to be on the curtain, higher, lower. No, it would be dropping on the floor. It would just be the position of his finger was once upwards and 7 times downwards. And again he would count as he did before. And then, not al dam hasoir, he'll then remove the blood of the goat that was on that stand. V'hiniach dam hapor, and in its place he'll now put the container with the remaining blood of the bull. That is according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says there was only one stand. According to Tanna Kama, who says that there were 2 stands, he would just put back the one with the soir and put back the blood with the bull and take the blood of the soir. V'hizo mimenu ala pareiches, and he would sprinkle towards the pareiches, towards the curtain, shekeneged ha'orin, parallel to where the orin was, mibachutz, from within the heichal, echos lemalo v'sheva lemata v'chulu. So now what have we done? He sprinkled echod lemalo sheva lemata of the bull in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then he did the same with the echod lemalo sheva lemata with the blood of the goat, and then he sprinkled echod lemalo sheva lemata in the heichal towards the curtain, and then he did the same thing with the blood of the goat. And then what's next? Iro dam hapor l'toich dam hasoir. He now took all the remaining blood of the bull and poured it into the container that held the remaining blood of the goat. V'nosan es hamole bereikon, and in order that it should mix well, he would then take all the contents, all the blood from that container, and pour it back into the container that initially held the blood of the bull, in order that it should be mixed well. And then we're going to see later on in the next Mishnah, we're going to see what happened, what he actually did with this mixture of the blood. And we're going to see this on Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Mishanignaz loikatoni. If we look in the first word of the Mishnah, it says Mishanital orin, when the orin was taken from, whenever it was taken from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But it doesn't say when it was hidden. Elo Mishanital, And the Gemara now says, Tnan Commander Oma, our Mishnah must be following the opinion that says that Orein Golo LeBovel, that the Orein was not hidden, rather it was exiled to Bovel. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, this is actually a Machlekes. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Orein Golo LeBovel. Rabbi Eliezer says that Orein was taken away to Bovel. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, V'lishuvas hashono, at the turn of the year, Sholach Hamelech Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar sent, Vayiviehu, and they brought him, referring to Yoyochon Hamelech, they brought him Bovelo to Bovel, Im Klei Chemdas Beis Hashem, with the precious utensils of the home of Hashem, Vayamlech Tzidkiyahu Ochiv al Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. What is this Klei Chemdas Beis Hashem? What is these precious utensils, precious Kli of Hashem's home? So that, says Rabbi Eliezer, that was the Orein that held the Torah, which is so precious to us, and it was taken away by Nebuchadnezzar. Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Reb Shimon ben Yochai also says that Orein Golo LeBovel, that the Orein was exiled to Bovel. Shenemar brings a different pasuk, a pasuk in Yeshaya, that says, Hine yomim boim v'nisa kol asher b'veisecha v'asher otzra v'eisecha ad hayom hazeh Bovel. Everything that was collected in the home, in the Beis HaMikdash, is going to be taken to Bovel. Lo yivosir dover Omar Hashem. Hashem said nothing will be left over. What's this dover? There's something called dover. So the Pashup Pshat is, dover means a thing. No thing will be left over. Says the Gemara, says Reb Shimon bar Yochai, this dover is alluding to the dibros, the aseres hadibros, elo aseres hadibros sheboy, the aseres hadibros on the luchos that were hidden inside the Orein, those were taken to Bovel, the Yivosir Dover Omar Hashem, that the Orein with the luchos is going to be taken and exiled to Bovel. Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish Omer, Orein bimkoimoi nignas. The Orein was hidden in its place in the Beis HaMikdash. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, and the Pasuk goes as follows, Vayarichu habadim, that the poles of the Orein were lengthened, they were stretched, they were pulled out, Roshe habadim, Vayiro Roshe habadim, and the tips of the poles were noticeable, were seen min hakodesh el pnei advir, they were seen right to the Heichal, v'lo yiro achutza, and they were not seen outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, v'yiru sham ad hayom hazeh. The Orein will be there, referring to there, what the Gemara calls b'mekoimoi, in its place, ad hayom hazeh, till today. So clearly it was not taken to exile to Bovel. That's Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish. So now the Gemara is saying, Upliga de'ula, the Brisa we just learnt now, that has three opinions. We have Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon who both say that Golo LeBovel, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish who says that it was bimkoimoi nignaz, it was hidden in its place, seems to be arguing with Ula. The Omar Ula. Ula said as follows, Shad Reb Masechet ben Chorosh as Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Beroimi. Reb Masechet ben Chorosh met Reb Shimon ben Yochai in Rome, and he asked him as follows, V'chi me'echar she'Reb Eliezer melamdenu. Since Rabbi Eliezer taught us, Pam Rishona Ushnia, proving from two psukim, twice he proved that Orein Golo LeBovel, that the Orein was taken to Bovel. Rishona, the first place he proved it, Hard Omron, is what we saw in the Brisa from this pasuk that says, Vayuvieho Bovelo im Kli Chemdas Beis Hashem, with the Kli Chemda, with the precious Kalim in Hashem's home. Shnia, what's the second pasuk Rabbi Eliezer quoted? Ma'hi Dechsiv, as it says in another pasuk, Vayetze mi Bas Tzion, that it was taken out from Bas Tzion, referring to Yerushalayim. Kol Hadora. What does it mean, Kol Hadora? Kol Hadora means all its splendor. My Kol Hadora. The word Hadora can also be written, or can be, one can, as a remez, it's also, a Hey and the Ches are very similar. It's as if it says, Kol Chadoro. Chadoro meaning the innermost chambers of the Beis HaMikdash. So when it says Vayetze mi Bas Tzion, Kol Chadoro means that the Kalim, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Orein that was in the inner chambers, where Vayetze mi Bas Tzion was removed from Yerushalayim and taken to Bovel. So this was the second pasuk that Rabbi Eliezer brought to prove that it was that the Orein was sent to Bovel. Ato Reb Shimon bar Yochai asks Masechet ben Chorosh, Mo'ato Omer. What do you say about this? Omar Loi, Shimon Bar Yochai said to Reb Masya ben Chorosh, Shani Oimer Oren bimkoimoi nignas. I actually say that the Oren stayed in its place. Shenemar, as it says, Vayarichu abadim, the poles were extended, v'goimer, and that's the pasuk that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai brought in the Medrash, that Vayarichu abadim, v'yirou roshi abadim in hakodesh al pnei advir v'lo yirou achutza, v'yiu sham ad hayom hazeh. So Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that the Oren was actually not exiled to Bavel. And the problem is that this posuk, it's Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish who brought it before, not Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said before that it was Golol LeBavel, and he brought a different posuk. So we had the brisa that says Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says that Golol LeBavel, that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says it was Golol LeBavel. Here we have Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai telling Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh it was not Golol LeBavel. It was Bimkoimoi Nignas. Omali Rabbi Ula, Rabbi said to Ula, my mashma. Where do you see this? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you just quoted Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who brought the same pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish brought before, that brought a raya that the Oren was nignaz, was hidden in its place from this pasuk where we say Vayarichu abadim, they extended the poles, etc. Where do you see from there that the Oren was not exiled? Tichsiv. Because it says in the pasuk, the end of that pasuk, Vayiu sham ad hayom hazeh. The Oren is going to stay there until today. So the Rabbi asked Ula, V'chol heicha dichsiv ad hayom hazeh la'olam hu. Every time it says in the Torah the words ad hayom hazeh, it means forever, till today. V'oksiv, there's another pasuk. The pasuk says in Shoftim, V'es hayevusi yoyshev Yerushalayim. The people of Yevusi that were dwelling in Yerushalayim, Lo Yehirishu B'nei Binyamin, the people of B'nei Binyamin did not manage to drive them out. Vayeshev HaYevusi, as B'nei Binyamin, and the people of Yevusi, they dwelled together with the B'nei Binyamin in Yerushalayim, Ad hayom hazeh, till today. Hochinamya, you're going to suggest, D'lo yigolu, that the Bnei Binyamin till today are there together with the Yevusi people, and that the people of Binyamin were not exiled from Eretz Yisrael. This is contrary to a brisa. V'otani, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, 52 shana, for 52 years, lo ovar ish b'Yehuda. No person went through Yehuda. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, al hehorim, upon the mountains, upon the hills, eso b'chi vonei. There was the raising of weeping and wailing, v'al na'ois midbar, and the pastures of the wilderness, kina. They cried a kina. Ki nitzatzu mibli ish oiver, because it was parched without any person passing through it. V'lo isham u'kol mikne, and the voice of cattle was not heard there. Mi'oif hashamayim, from the birds of the sky. V'ad behema, poshet pshat, meaning, and from the birds to the beast, nodudu, they wandered, halochu, and they were gone. So the Gemara says, in the Brisa it says, Rabbi Yehuda says, what does it mean, va'ad behema, until behema? It doesn't only mean the pshat, which is until the beast. It means the amount of years of the numerical value of behema. Behema b'gematria 52, the numerical value of behema is 52 havu, is 52. For 52 years is when the pasuk says that mibli ish oiver, nobody went through it. So it's clear that Bnei Binyamin were not there with the Yevusi forever. And if Bnei Binyamin were not there, how do you understand the words Ad hayom hazeh? You said that the source that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai told Reb Masya ben Chorosh, according to what you Ula are telling us, that the Oren was stayed over there in its place forever, is because it says Vayiu sham ad hayom hazeh. Ad hayom hazeh doesn't always mean forever. V'tanya, another brisa that also teaches us that the Bnei Binyamin must have been exiled at some point, because it says in the brisa, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Sheva shonim, for 7 years, niskaima, that means it's Eretz Yisrael endured gofris v'melach, sulfur and salt, be'eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael. V'omer Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan explained, my tama, what would be the source of Rabbi Yossi in the brisa, Rabbi Yossi? Because Asya, he learns Gzeir Shava, bris. Ksiv hoch, it says in one pasuk regarding Eretz Yisrael, it says Vehigbir bris lorabim, that that they forged a strong covenant l'rabim with the great ones, with the great people, shavua echad, for 7 years. Uchsiv, and it says in Hossam, it says in another pasuk, va'omru al asher ozu as bris Hashem, and it said regarding those who they forsaked the covenant of Hashem, Elikei Avoisam, asher kara simon b'yitzios meretz Mitzrayim. So there's Gzeira Shava bris, in the same way as when it speaks about those that are forsaking the connection, the covenant with Hashem, it says bris, and it also says bris, v'higvir bris l'rabim shavua echad. So you see from there that for 7 years, that after the Golus, there was nothing doing. It was Gofris or Melech. There was no life in Eretz Yisrael. So you see there that Bnei Binyamin must have been exiled from Eretz Yisrael. If Bnei Binyamin were exiled, then it must be that when it says that they sat with the Yevusi in Yerushalayim, Ad Hayom Hazeh, it doesn't mean forever. If so, how do you know that the Orin stayed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, stayed in its place? Omer Lei. So Ula responded to Rava, or to Rabba, and said, Hocha ksiv sham. Hasam lo ksiv sham. Over there, regarding the Bnei Binyamin and Yevusi, the pasuk says that they were Vayeshev Yevusi as Bnei Binyamin b'Yerushalayim ad hayom hazeh. It doesn't say sham there. However, regarding the poles of the Orin, it says Vayiyu sham ad hayom hazeh. If it says sham, it means it's there forever. Asks the Gemara, B'chol heicha dichsiv sham la'ilamu. And every time it says sham ad hayom hazeh, it means it's there forever. May say we're going to ask a question from another brisa. It says in the pasuk, Umehem min bnei Shimon, and some of the descendants of Shimon, holchu lahar seir, they went to Har Seir, anoshim chamesh meis, 500 men, uplatya, name of a person, unaarya, another person, urafoya, another one, uziel, these were all the sons bnei Yish'i, beroisham, at their head. Vayaku es she'eris ha'pleita, they smote the remnants of the survivors of Amalek. Vayeshu sham, and they sat there, they dwelled there, the Bnei Shimon dwelled there, ad hayom hazeh. So it says that it was sham ad hayom hazeh. So if regarding the poles of the Orin, when it says Vayiyu sham ad hayom hazeh, means it's there forever, and that's proof that the Orin was never taken away from its place, it was hidden in its place, then we would assume that the Bnei Shimon are still in this place, ad hayom hazeh. But that can't be. Ukvar Olo Sancheiriv Melech Ashur. Since then, the Sancheiriv, the king of Ashur, rose to power. Ubilbil, and he confused Kol Harotzis, all the nations and all the people. So the Bnei Shimon are not anymore in their place. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, the pasuk says, Ki Omar b'koyach yodi osisi u'b'chochmosi ki nevunoisi v'osir, I have removed gvulos amim, the boundaries of the people of the nations, va'asudoisehem, and their treasures shoiseisi, I have plundered, va'oirit kabir yoshvim. So you see clearly that Bnei Shimon are not that, must have been removed, even though the pasuk says regarding them that they remained sham ad hayom hazeh. Says the Gemara Tiyufta. So this is a refutation of what Ula said, because Ula explained Reb Shimon bar Yochai as assuming that from the pasuk Vayiyu sham ad hayom hazeh must mean that it's there forever. We see here that sham ad hayom hazeh doesn't mean forever, and this is also then a refutation to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, who brought proof from this pasuk that Orin b'mkoymoi nignas. Says the Gemara, Omer of Nachman, Tana v'chachomim oimrim. We learned in a brayso that the chachomim hold Orin belishkas dir ha'etzim hayagonus. There seems to be a third opinion, not that the Orin was exiled to Bavel, and not that the Orin was hidden in its place. Rather, it was hidden in the chamber of the wood. Hayagonus. Omer of Nachman by Yitzchok. We also learned this way in the Mishnah. What does it say? It's a Mishnah in Shkolim. The Mishnah says, Maisa b'koyin echod. There was once a koyin, shaya misasek, that he was busying himself in this chamber of the woods. V'ra'a ritzpa meshuna mechabreseh. He noticed that one of the floor tiles, one of the stones of the floor, was different to the other stones. It was slightly raised. It was clear to him that one of these stones had actually been lifted and then replaced. And he came to inform his friends of his find. He didn't manage to finish saying what he wanted to say until he died. And they knew for certainty they must be that the orin is hidden there. What was he doing in this chamber of the woods? He was playing with his hatchet. It was one of the tools they would use to chop up the wood. He was playing there with it, and somehow through his playing there, he noticed this tile, the stone on the floor that was raised. There were two kohanim who had a blemish, which meant that they were not allowed to do any of the service in the Beis Hamikdash. They were, however, allowed to go through the woods to make sure there was no wormy parts, and if there was any wormy part of the woods, they would chop it away, because the halacha is a wormy wood was not allowed to go on the Mizbeach. And this hatchet of one of them fell, and it fell onto this stone, and a fire emerged from between the stones there, and consumed this hatchet, this tool that he was using. And this was another incident, or maybe the same incident, but this was where they saw that the orin was probably or definitely hidden there. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda asked a question, a seeming contradiction between two psukim. Ksiv, it says in one pasuk, we've seen this pasuk already, Vayarichu habadim, that the poles were extended, Vayirau roshe habadim, and the tips of the poles were seen, min hakodesh al pnei advir, they could see them into the heichal, v'lo yirau achutza, and they could not be seen outside the kodesh hakedoshim. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. It's a contradiction. First it says v'yirau roshe abadim, that the tips of the poles could be seen, and immediately afterwards it says v'lo yirau achutza, that they could not be seen. Ha'ketzad, how can we understand this? Says Rabbi Yehuda, nirin ve'enam nirin. They were seen and not seen. That means the poles in their naked state, that means the poles themselves obviously couldn't be seen, but they were noticed. They were protruding from out of the curtain. And let's see this in the Brisa. So Tani Namiochi, we found a Brisa to this effect as well, that it says Vayiru Rosh Abadim. Vayiru Rosh Abadim, that the tips of the poles could be seen. Are you going to say that it cannot be, that means the poles could not be moved from their place? Talmud Lema, Vayarichu Abadim. It says before that the poles got extended, and therefore we can understand how these poles should be seen beyond the position where the orin was standing. Are you going to suggest that they extended to the point, if it says Vayiro Rosh Abadim and HaKodesh al Pnei Advir, they could be seen outside? Are you suggesting that the poles were ripped a hole through the curtains out and were seen in the Heichal? Talmud Lema, no, v'lo yirau achutza. They could not be seen in the Heichal. So what does this mean? Ha'ketzad, doichakin, the poles pushed the curtain out a little bit, u'boiltin, and they protruded, v'yotzin b'pareiches, and then when you're looking at the other side of the pareiches, you could see these two poles trying to push their way out, but the poles themselves did not make a hole through the curtain. V'nirin, it looked kashnei dadi isha, like the two breasts of a woman, that even though they're not seen on the outside, but one can see from the outside that they exist. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Tzroyer hamoyer, like a bundle of moyer, which is a scent, an aroma, very pleasant. Besamim, doidi li, is my beloved one to me. Bein shodai yolin, between my breasts, yolin are lodged. That's where a woman who lodges this bundle of besamim, of scent, she lodges it between her breasts because it's very fond to her. So too here, between the two poles of the orin that were protruding like the breasts, that's where the ketores was done, and the ketores was an avodah that was very fond to Hashem. Continues the Gemara, Omer of Katina, B'shah shal Yisrael oilim l'regel. When Klal Yisrael would come for Yom Tov to be oil regel to the Beis Hamikdash, megalelin lohemes hapareiches, they would roll up the curtains, umarin lemes hakruvim, and they would show them the kruvim, The kruvim were on top of the kapiris, which was the lid on the orin. There was these two molds of they looked like children or like malachim. It's wherever the kruvim they looked like they had wings, and they were spread over the orin hakodesh, the orin. And at times, when Klal Yisrael were doing what Hashem wanted, then these two kruvim would actually be facing each other. And other times, when Klal Yisrael were not doing what Hashem wanted, the kruvim, by miracle, would actually turn away from each other. It's a Gemara in Baba Basra. But it says here that when Klal Yisrael came to be Oile Regel, they would roll up the curtains, and they would show Klal Yisrael as a kruvim, these two kruvim, shahoyu ma'oirim, that they were joined, they were embraced, zeh b'zeh, one with the other. And the Kohanim would say to Klal Yisrael, Re'uchi baschem, see the fondness and the love, lifnei amokim, how much Hashem loves you, Klal Yisrael, that it's comparable, kachibas zachor on the keva, like the joining and the embrace of a male with a female. Mostiv Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda asked a question on this. How could you show Klal Yisrael the kruvim? Does it not say in the pasuk, V'lo yavoyu lirois, that the Leviim who were going to carry the Orin and the Mizbeach when they were in transit in the Midbar, then whilst the Kohanim were dismantling the Mishkan and covering the Orin and the Mizbeach, it says that V'lo yavoyu lirois, the Leviim were not allowed to come and see the Orin Kavala es HaKodesh, whilst the Kohanim were covering over these holy utensils. So you see there, V'omer Rav Yehuda, Omer Rav, who said in the name of Rav that b'shas achnosas kelim l'nartek, at the time whilst these kelim, these utensils were being placed into their nartek, into their containers, shelohem, into their respective covers, the Leviim were not allowed to see it. So you see that it's disrespectful to see the Orin and to see the kruvim. So how can you say that when it came to Yom Tov, they revealed the kruvim to everyone? Omer of Nachman. Rav Nachman said that there was a fundamental difference between what was happening in the Midbar when they were in transit in the desert to what happened in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Where do we find such a concept? It's a mashal, the kala, a bride, kol zman she bebeis avia, when she's still in her father's house, which means she's not fully married yet, then tsnua mibayla, she's modest, embarrassed somewhat of her husband. Kivon sheba'as lebeis chamia, once the marriage ceremony is totally final, and she's now married in his house, in his father's house, then she feels much more comfortable with him. She's that little bit less modest, so to speak, and less ashamed or embarrassed of him, and therefore is happier to get closer to him than she would have been while still at home. So too in the Midbar, the relationship between Klal Yisrael and Hashem was relatively new still, and therefore it was inappropriate to reveal the Orin. However, once they were in the Beis HaMikdash and had gotten used to a constant relationship with Hashem, therefore it was more comfortable and more understood that the kruvim could be revealed. Moshe Rav Chana bar Rav Katina, Ma'aseh b'kohen echad shehoya misasek v'chulu. Rav Chana bar Rav Katina is asking, we said before that there was this incident with a kohen that was in that chamber, and he revealed where the Orin was, and this person died because he was not supposed to reveal where it was. What would be wrong with revealing where the Orin was? Probably because people would see it, and it's inappropriate to see it. So you see that even after the Beis HaMikdash was built, it was inappropriate to see the kruvim. Answers the Gemara, Omalei, that was different. Where was that? That was not when the kruvim were there in the first Beis HaMikdash. That's after they were hidden. It was the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. The second Beis HaMikdash was already after the Churban of the first Beis HaMikdash. But the Churban, it was similar to a Nizgarsha, to a divorce. Ka'omras. And Nizgarsha and Chazru l'chibasa harishayna. And once a couple get divorced, even if they remarry afterwards, which is similar to the second Beis HaMikdash, but from that point, after there's been a divorce, the relationship is more similar to the very first stage of their relationship, where she was still at home, where they're not as close to each other as they would be later, and therefore then the status of how it was in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, came back and it was inappropriate to look at the Orin. And when it says that they would show the people the Kruvim in the Orin, that would be in the first Beis HaMikdash, where the relationship was very close. Says the Gemara B'Mayoskinon. So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, it means this that we said, that they would roll up the curtains to show Klal Yisrael the Kruvim? When was that talking about? If it was in the first Beis HaMikdash, mihavoi pareiches, was there curtains there? We know that the partition between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the first Beis HaMikdash was the wall, the Amatraxin. It wasn't the curtains. Elo b'mikdasheni, you're talking about the second Beis HaMikdash? Mihava kruvim, there were no kruvim there. Says the Gemara, La'olam b'mikdash rishon. We must be talking about the first Beis HaMikdash. And even though it's true that there were not necessarily the two curtains there, because the two curtains, as we've discussed previously, that was only there in the second Beis HaMikdash. But however, there was a number of curtains separating the Klal Yisrael who were outside in the Azora and the Orin. Umay pareiches, which pareiches did they roll up? Pareiches, the Bovi, all the entrances between. There was the entrance of the Ulam, and there was the entrance of the Heichal, and even the entrance of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's true that the general partition was a wall, but in the center of this wall, this Amatraxin, there was an entranceway which had a curtain, and all those would be rolled up so that Klal Yisrael could see the Kruvim. Ta'omer B'Zera Marav, B'Zera said in the name of Rav, and he's referring to the second Beis HaMikdash, as we're about to see, but the same applied to the first Beis HaMikdash, that Shloisha also Pareiches Hoyu B'Mikdash, there were 13 curtains in the Mikdash, in the Azara. Shiva Keneged Shiva Sha'orim, there were 7 entrances, 7 openings, doorways into the Azara. They each had a curtain. Shtayim Achas Lepischei Shel Heichal V'Achas Lepischei Shel Ulam, another 2, one for the Ulam and one for the Heichal. And Shtayim, another 2, and this was in the second Beis HaMikdash, is B'Dvir, between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. As we've discussed previously, there were 2 curtains in Amma apart. Shtayim, and another 2, Kenegdon Ba'aliyah. There was an upper story, an upper floor on top of the Heichal and on top of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and above the 2 curtains between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so too on the upper layer, in the same place, there would be these 2 curtains. These are the 13 curtains that were in the second Beis HaMikdash. But in the same way as we find that in the second Beis HaMikdash, there was a curtain between the Azara and the Ulam, and a curtain between the Ulam and the Heichal, and a curtain between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so too, this was in the first Beis HaMikdash, and that's what they would roll up by Yom Tov to show Klal Yisrael the Kruvim. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omar, Lo'ilam b'mikdash sheni, says it could be the second Beis HaMikdash. And indeed, there were no Kruvim in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So what does it mean that they would roll up the curtains and show Klal Yisrael the Kruvim? Umarim lema Kruvim shehoyu mo'irim. What does that mean? It doesn't mean the actual Kruvim that were by the Orin. Rather, Kruvim the Tzurasa Havakaima. We're talking about the Kruvim that were either painted onto the walls of the Heichal or that were carved into wood and stuck onto the walls of the Heichal. The Chsiv, as it says in the Pasuk says, Ve'es kol kirois habayis, all the walls of the bayis, referring to the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Meisav kola, was surrounded by designs, Pituchei miklois kruvim, V'timrois, there were kruvim that were part of these designs, V'timrois and palm trees, Upturei tzitzim, and blossoming flowers, Milifnim v'lachitzain, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim and in the Heichal. V'tzipazov, and those wooden carvings, they were coated with gold. Mishoir ala mechukah, and they were flattened over the carvings in order that the designs that were carved into the wood would then be reflected on the wood, on the gold that was covered over it. Or Sivan, it says in the Pasuk, Vaifatach al haluchois yodoiseo va'al mizgoroiseo kruvim aroyois v'timrois kema'ar ish v'loyois soviv. As compared to the joining of a man and his companion. What does it mean? Mai kamar ish v'loyois. Omar Rabbi bar Rav Shila ki ish is like a man, hama'ura, which is joined b'levoya shaloi, to his companion in an embrace, and that is what these designs would be. And these designs were in the walls of the Heichal, even in the second Beis Hamikdash, and that's what Klal Yisrael would be shown to show them how dear they are to Hashem. And some of the Mefarshim say that in the same way as the Kruvim in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the first Beis Hamikdash, they would change positions depending on the spiritual state of Klal Yisrael, the same would apply to these images on the walls of the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. They would also change position. And when Klal Yisrael saw that these Kruvim that were etched and carved into the walls of the Heichal, that they were facing each other and embracing each other, that was a sign of how much Hashem loved Klal Yisrael. Omer Shlokish, b'shah shenichnasu nochrim leHeichal, when the Goyim came into the Heichal to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, ra'u kruvim hamaurim zeh b'zeh, they saw that these kruvim, and if we're talking about the second Beis Hamikdash, they saw that the designs of the kruvim that were etched into wood on the walls of the Heichal, they were embracing each other. Hoitzion l'shuk, the Goyim peeled off these designs, these carvings off the wall, and took them out to the marketplace. V'omru, and they said, Yisrael alolu, these Klal Yisrael, shebirchos on bracha, that when they give a bracha, its bracha is valid, and Hashem listens to those brachas. Uklilosom klola, and there's a power in every curse they give. Yasku b'dvorim alolu, they are engaged in their Beis Hamikdash. This is what they have. Miyad hizilum. So at that point, the Goyim would degrade Klal Yisrael and look down upon them. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, Kol mechabdeh, all those that previously respected Klal Yisrael, hizilu, now look down on them. Kira'u ervosa, because they saw, they were given, they managed to peep into the most intimate connection between Klal Yisrael and Hashem, and that they felt it made them look down on Klal Yisrael. And the Mefarshim all explain that we all know that there are certain things that are appropriate in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, inside the Kodesh Pnimo in the Heichal. And when the reflection of the intimate relationship between Hashem and Klal Yisrael, it belongs inside the Heichal, inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's only when Hoitzion L'Shuk, when you take it out to the public, and you take it out and show everybody can see it, that's when it becomes Ro'er Vasa, that's when it becomes cheap. Continues the Gemara. Ushtsiya hoisa nikras, in the second Beis Hamikdash, and the Mishnah actually says from the time of David and Shmuel, there was a stone in the Kodesh HaKadoshim that was called Shasiya, which means a foundation. Tana, in the Brisa we learnt, Shemimena hushtat oilam, the reason this stone on which the Oren sat was called Even HaShasiya is because the whole world was founded from this stone. Tanan Commander Omar, and our Mishnah is following the opinion that says Mitzion Nivra Ha'olam, from Yerushalayim, from Tzion, that's where the world was founded, that's where the world became, that's where Hashem created the world from. He created, so to speak, the point that was going to be Tzion, and everything was added to that as the world was created. Titani, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Oilam me'em to'isoin nivra, the world was created from its center. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, Betzekes, offer la mutzok, when dirt was poured onto the mutzok, onto the bedrock, uragovim yuduboku, and stumps of earth and solid was stuck onto that original, the nucleus of the world, which was its center. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Yeshua says, Oilam min atzodim nivra, that the world was created from its sides, from the four sides, the four different, the concepts of the four sides, that's where the world was created, and then the world expanded from its sides towards the center until the world became complete. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, Ki lasheleg yomer, he said to the snow, Hevei oretz, become earth. V'geshem motor, and showers and rain. V'geshem mitros uzay, and showers and mighty rains. And these are the four concepts, Geshem, Motor, Geshem, Mitros, Uzoi. Those were the starting point of world was from these 4 points, which is the four sides of the world. This is the basic reading of the Gemara. We don't really understand what these things mean, but we're reading the Gemara. Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha Omar, Re'even Yora HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'yam, Hashem threw a stone into the sea, Mimenu Nishtas Olam, and the world was founded upon that. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, it says, Almo Adoneo Hotba'u, into what was its base? Its base is sunken into, Oimi Yoro Even Pinosa, or who cast a stone, a cornerstone. So you see that the world started with a cornerstone that was cast. The Chachamim say, Mitzion Nivra, as we saw before, that the world was created from the point Tzion, from Yerushalayim. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, Mizmor La'osov, Keil Eloikim Hashem, Diber Vayikra Oretz, Mimizrach Shemesh Ad Mevoyoi. So you see that the Pasuk in Perek Nun of Tehillim starts with Vayikra Oretz, the creation of the world. Va'omer, and it says in the next Pasuk in that Perek of Tehillim, Mitzioin Michlal Yoifi Elokim Hoifia. What does that mean? What does it mean, Mitzioin Michlal Yoifi? That Mimenu, from Tzioin, Muchlal was included, Yoifi Shaloilam, the whole beauty of the world expanded from the point, the starting point of the world, which was Tzion. Continues the Gemara, Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Gadol Omer, Eile Toildos Shemaim V'Ha'oretz Bahi Baram. These are the offspring, the children. Obviously, it doesn't mean in its physical sense. So the Toildos of the Shemaim, of the sky, the heaven, V'Oretz, and earth, Bahi Baram, when it was created, B'yei Masois Hashem Elikim Eretz Shemayim, the day that Hashem created the earth and the heaven. Toildos Shemaim, the Toildos of Shemayim, which are the sun, the moon, all those bodies that give light, the stars, Mishamayim Nivru, they were created from the sky. Toildos Ha'oretz, and the Toildos of the earth, Mi'oretz Nivru, were created from matter of the earth. The Chachamim say, Eilu ve'eilu Mitzion Nivru. The Toildos HaShemayim and the Toildos Ha'oretz, they were both created from the point called Tzion. Shenemar, and brings again the psukim we saw before, that it says in the first pasuk, Mizmor La'osov Keil Elokim Hashem Diber Vayikra Oretz Mimizrach Shemesh Ad Mevoyoi. And this is including the sun, Mimizrach Shemesh Ad Mevoyoi, including the Toildos of the Shemayim. And the next pasuk, Vaymer, the next pasuk says, Mitzioin Michlal Yoifi Elikim Hoifia, Mimenu, from Tzion Muchlal Yoifi Shaloilam. All the beauties of the world are included there and come from there. So the Chachamim say that everything stems from the point called Tzion. And in Mirz Hashem, in the next Shiur, we're going to continue from here.